Hey, greetings again out there, everyone. Whether you're a member of OCC, a friend of OCC, or just someone who has stumbled across this video, greetings to you. Hope that this now mid portion of August is going as well for you as can be expected, given that the summer of 2020 is like no other summer any of us have ever experienced before, right? I've been wondering lately whether some of the anxiety that a lot of us are feeling, some of the vague dis-ease, discomfort, sort of that nagging sense, maybe not particularly acute or painful or urgent, but kind of in the back of your mind, this sense of not all being well with the world. I've been wondering exactly what the source of that feeling is. And obviously, I mean, the, the undeniable truth is we're in a pandemic. We're also in an economic recession. We're also in a period of great unrest, civil unrest around the country related to issues about racial justice. And on top of that, it's an election year. And so you put all four of those things together, and yeah, I mean, there is reason to feel a bit of angst or discomfort. But beyond those four obvious things, it just seems like maybe there's something else also. And what is that? And I've been thinking a lot about the old biblical idea of shepherding and of being a shepherd. And what is that all about? I mean, one way to think about it, I suppose, is what you think a particularly accurate synonym might be for the word shepherd. And of course, shepherd can be a noun or it can be a verb. So we might say that, in the standpoint of it being a noun, we might say a shepherd could be a leader. It could be a guide. It could be a teacher, potentially. On the other hand, we could look at it as a verb, and we could say, well, synonyms for shepherding as a verb could be, to guide, to direct, to orchestrate, to protect, to shield or shelter or hold together. Those would all be perfectly fine. Some of you out there may be saying, now, wait a minute, I seem to remember learning at some point that the word pastor has an origin in the word shepherd. And that is true. In fact, if you see a painting and it's a painting of a country scene or whatever, a wonderful field of flowers or something, and somebody describes it as sort of a pastoral scene. I mean, that kind of connotes that sense of old school, out in nature, in a pasture or a field or a clearing, and maybe there are sheep or goats or some sort of animal in a herd, and then there might be a human person leading them. I can't help but think of someone who used to be a congregational minister. He's now affiliated with another denominational group, but he was fond of saying that in truth, a congregational minister or pastor is really not the shepherd, that the shepherd is Jesus, and that really the pastor or minister or clergy person of the church is really more like the sheepdog, that the clergy person just kind of runs around the perimeter of the herd of people, nipping at their heels and trying to keep them bunched closer together with Jesus and keep them from drifting too far away from Jesus. I think that's a kind of compelling image, this idea of Jesus standing at the center of a circle and a bunch of people milling about around Jesus, and then having a clergy person circling the perimeter of the gathering and nipping at people's heels to keep them from drifting off. That's not a bad kind of an analogy or a metaphor for what ministry is all about in a local church, for sure. Scripture, as you may know, has some things to say about shepherding and about who a shepherd is specifically. We start today with Matthew chapter 9, a couple verses from that chapter. It says, "Then Jesus went about all the cities and villages, teaching in their synagogues and proclaiming the good news of the kingdom, curing every disease and every sickness. When he saw the crowds, he had compassion for them because they were harassed and helpless, like a sheep without a shepherd." And I do wonder if maybe here in the summer of 2020, some of us feel like we are sheep without a shepherd. Or maybe on the other side of things, maybe we feel like we're a sheep with an overabundance of shepherds. Too many. Every pundit, every medical doctor on television, immunologist, virologist, epidemiologist, every anchor person or news media outlet, every politician, that we have lots and lots of voices that are providing us with guidance, sometimes contradictory, sometimes confusing, sometimes ambiguous, and we're left to kind of try to figure out what to make of it all. Maybe we don't have a singular shepherd that is really providing us with definitive guidance, whether it be on the pandemic or on economic issues or on racial justice, whatever the front may be, whether it is just a matter of our own personal health. Hey, we've got no shortage of self-help books, right? And in this day and age, you don't even need a self-help book. You can just go to a self-help video or a self-help TED Talk of some sort. There's all kinds of self-help stuff out there too. So that's just another cluster of voices coming into our heads. Who really then is our shepherd? Well, you all know that kind of the definitive Old Testament answer comes from the very familiar Psalm 23. "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake." Yeah, God as our shepherd, above all the pundits and politicians and scientists and, news media folks, above all the psychologists and self-help gurus, above it all is supposed to be God as our primary top chief shepherd. What does that actually mean? I'd like you to take a good look at one more scripture story today, and it's from John chapter 10. It's a bit longer, but it's quite famous, and it sure has a lot to say. This is the voice of Jesus in John chapter 10. "Very truly I tell you, anyone who does not enter the sheepfold by the gate, but climbs in by another way, is a thief and a bandit. The one who enters by the gate is the shepherd of the sheep. The gatekeeper opens the gate for him, and the sheep hear his voice. He calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. When he has brought out all his own, he goes ahead of them, and the sheep follow him because they know his voice. They will not follow a stranger, but they will run from him because they do not know the voice of strangers." And then the narrator in John says, Jesus used this figure of speech with them but they did not understand what he was saying to them. Not shocking. It's hard enough to understand it with it written down on a piece of paper and being able to go over it carefully. Probably as these words first came out of Jesus' mouth, it was plenty confusing to them. So we can appreciate and empathize with those listeners way back when. But the story goes on. So again, Jesus said to them, "Very truly I tell you, I am the gate for the sheep. All who came before me are the thieves and bandits, but the sheep did not listen to them. I am the gate. Whoever enters by me will be saved, and will come in and go out and find pasture. The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I came that they may have life, and have it abundantly." So not only is Jesus talking about sheep and gates and all of that, but specifically identifying his objective. It's not to heap a lot of burdens on us, a lot of responsibilities and a lot of guilt, nor a lot of stress. No, Jesus is trying to be a guide that leads us not just to life, but to abundant life. That certainly sounds like good news to me. But one more screen here before we kind of finish with that story. Jesus continues, "I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. The hired hand, who is not the shepherd and does not own the sheep, sees the wolf coming and leaves the sheep and runs away. And the wolf snatches them and scatters them. The hired hand runs away because a hired hand does not care for the sheep. I am the good shepherd. I know my own, and my own know me, just as the Father knows me, and I know the Father. And I lay down my life for the sheep. I have other sheep that do not belong to this fold. I must bring them also, and they will listen to my voice. So there will be one flock and one shepherd." So there, Jesus seems to be not only identifying himself as the shepherd, but also putting out there a call to unity for us, right? This idea that there are sheep from far and wide, and Jesus has come to bring them together so that there might be one unified flock with the one unified shepherd, that being Jesus. Some of you may be aware, in fact, if you watched the video of my sermon this past Sunday, August 9th, or if you were there in person, you heard me make a passing reference to the 7 I am sayings in the Gospel of John. They're unique to the Gospel of John, but they're pretty famous. Let me put a graphic up on the screen so that you can actually see the 7 I am sayings. I am the bread of life. I am the light of the world. I am the gate for the sheep. I am the good shepherd. I am the way, the truth, and the life. I am the resurrection and the life. I am the vine, and you are the branches. 7 remarkable one-sentence statements, I am statements by Jesus, only found in the Gospel of Mark, unique to that book of the Bible, but pretty powerful stuff. And 2 of the 7 are contained just in the 16-verse passage we just looked at. I am the gate for the sheep. And then secondly, I am the good shepherd. Now, we may say Jesus was mixing his metaphors here. It may very well be that the writer of the Gospel of John got some things a bit jumbled up, or maybe wrote them down from memory in a way that lacks a bit of clarity for us. Is Jesus saying that he's a gate through which we enter into the kingdom of heaven? Or is Jesus saying he is a shepherd who will lead us to the kingdom of heaven? Well, the answer seems to be both. It appears that Jesus employs both of these metaphors in fairly rapid succession, one from the other, in order that we might sort of see both truths. Jesus is both a guide and a portal, if you want to put it that way. It really leads to the question for each of us as Congregationalists, free thinking, right? Faith focused, but also free thinking. It leads to the question for each of us, who is Jesus? So I led off this video this morning with who is your shepherd, but related certainly to that is who is Jesus? How does Jesus fit into the picture for you? Theologians have a fancy $10 word for this particular line of inquiry. It's called Christology. Think of it as a subset of theology. Specifically, it's the subset of theology that deals with the question of who is Jesus, or who is or was Christ. And commonly you will hear clergy persons and theologians refer to Christology as either being high Christology or low Christology. Well, what do they mean by that? High Christology, just to put this into exceedingly oversimplified terms, but in the interest of brevity, I'm going to dare to oversimplify. A high Christology you could think of as the belief that Jesus is or equals God. This is arguably at the extreme high end of the spectrum there. It is arguably heretical. It raises obvious questions. I mean, Jesus did say, I and the Father are one. He did say that in the Gospels. But he also prays to the Father, which, if they're one and the same, leads to some puzzling logical questions for us. There is a passage in Scripture where Jesus is speaking of the end times, the apocalypse, the end of the world, and he says, nobody knows the day or the hour, not even the Son, referring to himself, but only the Father. So apparently Jesus' knowledge of the future is not equal to that of God the Father. But there are some that have a high Christology, meaning, and again, at the absolute extreme edge of that height, you would simply put an equal sign between Jesus and God. God beamed down to earth, walked around for 33 years, and then beamed back up. High Christology. At the low end, the very lowest end, you would say, well, Jesus was just a guy. Jesus was a man, entirely a human, not qualitatively different from Moses or King David or any of the other heroes of the Old Testament, not qualitatively different from some heroes of the faith that came after Jesus. Jesus was just a particularly outstanding person. Now that's at the very low end. Believe me, it's not a binary choice. Most of us who consider ourselves to be Christians, who identify ourselves as Christian, are somewhere in the middle on the spectrum. And there is a spectrum here. There is a continuum here. Most of us are not at the absolute upper edge of that continuum, nor at the absolute lower edge. But hopefully this is helpful to you in beginning to think in terms of your own faith. Who for you is Jesus? Where is your Christology? Now, in the year 451, a little bit more than 4 centuries after Jesus was crucified, there was a council, and it can be pronounced you're probably looking at the screen going, how do I say that? Some will pronounce it the Council of Chalcedon. Some will pronounce it the Council of Chalcedon. I don't really think that's all that important. Frankly, I don't think it's all that important that you memorize the name of that place or the spelling or the pronunciation. But what was done there is pretty significant and has remained pretty significant for these nearly 1600 years. And that is that at this council, and there were other early church councils, right? You had the Council of Nicaea, the Council of Constantinople, and so forth. You had various councils. Well, at the Council of, we'll call it Chalcedon, let's call it that, 451, they came up with a statement of Jesus' nature. Now, at the time, there were all kinds of theories floating around. There was a theory that Jesus was actually a being of two different substances, a God substance and a human substance. There was a theory that no, Jesus was of one nature or one substance, but two wills, that sort of battling in Jesus' head. You had a Jesus the man will, and then you had a God or Christ will, and they were both coexisting in the same personhood of Jesus. Different, two wills or one will, two natures or one nature, two substances, if you want to use that word, or one. What exactly, how would you characterize who Jesus was? And they came up with the following, and obviously they didn't do it in English, so it has been rendered or translated into English a few different ways. You may see it written as the statement, Jesus was fully human and fully divine. Or you may see it written as Jesus was truly God and truly man. Or thirdly, you may see it written as Jesus was fully human and fully God. Now, believe me, that's a definition that to a lot of people, a lot of literal scientific thinking people, and I will tell you to a lot of children and youth too, it's a definition that is an entirely, thoroughly unsatisfying definition. Because kids will often say, okay, that means Jesus was 50% God and 50% man. That's not what the council in 451 meant. They meant 100% God and simultaneously 100% man. Well, that doesn't work for kids who are thinking in fairly concrete or even mathematical terms. And maybe some of us adults struggle in the same way. How exactly can any entity be fully, completely, 100% of human nature and simultaneously, fully, completely of 100% of divine nature? And it's a mystery. One thinks of Jesus' response to Peter in the Gospels at one point where Jesus said, well, for men this would be impossible, but for God all things are possible. It's a mystery. Now, you may not like the definition that the council in 451 came up with. That's entirely fine. Truth be told, I struggle with it as well. I lift it up to you because, frankly, it has become the mainstream Christian standard position. Not for all Christians, but let's say for a really sizable chunk of Christians. It is the Christology on which they stand, that Jesus was fully human and fully divine. You may love that definition. When you see those words, that may just click with you and say, yes, aha, that is where my heart and mind are at when I think about who Jesus is. Wherever you are on the Christological continuum, way up here, way down here, somewhere in the middle, however you feel about the 451 opinion of that ecumenical council, I think it is a worthy question for each of us to struggle with. For each of us individually, again, as free thinking, faith focused Congregationalists, or any others of you out there in the YouTube universe watching this, you may not be Congregationalists, but you're at least somewhat intrigued by Christianity. You may or may not identify as Christian. Who is Jesus? Historically, spiritually, and even metaphysically. Who is Jesus? And is there a chance that Jesus might be the shepherd that a lot of us are really looking for at this very anxiety-ridden, uncertain time in our lives in the summer of 2020? And so, as you know, I tend to leave you with some questions for reflection. Today is no exception to that. I have 5 for you today. First, and I say de facto, meaning in truth or in fact, in reality, who are your shepherds? I'm pretty sure we all have more than one, meaning we all look to certain people for guidance. For you, a shepherd may be a spouse, a parent, maybe even an adult child. A shepherd may be your supervisor at work, your neighbor down the street. It may be your financial advisor. It may be a particular news outlet or a particular anchor person on the news. It may be a particular newspaper or politician or pundit. It may be a particular organization or agency of the government. When it comes to the pandemic, for example, maybe you turn to the CDC as sort of your North Star in trying to figure out how you should live your lives during the pandemic. Or maybe it's a particular doctor or scientific expert of some sort. I'm pretty sure we all have at least several shepherds, if we're honest with ourselves, de facto, in fact, in lived reality. Where do we get our guidance? Those are our shepherds. Who are they? Secondly, where does God rank among the shepherds? Going back to the 23rd Psalm, the Old Testament sense of this, the Lord, God, is my shepherd, I shall not want. Well, who is God? And for you, where does God rank in your list of shepherds? I think it's pretty clear from a whole lot of different portions of the Bible that God longs to be number one in our lives. Love the Lord your God, Jesus said, with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. This is the first and greatest commandment. And he didn't just make that up on the fly. He was quoting from the Old Testament book of Deuteronomy, chapter 6. So both Jewish folks and Christian folks are familiar with those words. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. This is the first and greatest commandment. To me, that implies pretty undeniably, unquestionably, inescapably that God seeks to be in the number one spot in our lives. We may have other shepherds. Our auto mechanic may be a shepherd giving us guidance on certain issues. There's all kinds of people that may give us guidance in different specific areas of our life. But who is the shepherd in chief? God. The Old Testament says it. Jesus himself says it. But what about Jesus? Is Jesus for you the same as God? And if not, is Jesus like God's deputy shepherd, vice shepherd, assistant shepherd? How does Jesus fit in too? So where does God fit in among your shepherds, and where does Jesus fit in? Thirdly, currently, right now, August 12th, 2020. Do you feel under-shepherded, over-shepherded, mis-shepherded, mal-shepherded? Yeah, I'm making up a couple of compound words there that may not actually exist in the English language, but you get the idea. Do you feel like you're just drowning in voices seeking to guide you to do or not do this, that, and the other thing, and it's just too much, it's too muddled, it's too jumbled, it's too confusing? Enough. Away with the noise. Or do you feel under-shepherded? Like, oh, please, somebody just tell me with purposefulness and clarity what the truth is so that I can make good decisions based on it. Do you feel under-shepherded, over-shepherded? Do you feel in any way mis- or mal-shepherded, like people are, for whatever their agendas may be, they are deliberately or maybe even unknowingly or unintentionally giving you bad guidance, misinformation, disinformation, whatever. Fourthly, if you had a face-to-face with a trustworthy shepherd right now, what would you ask? Would it be a question about the specific biological microbial nature of COVID? Would it be something about racial justice? Would it be something about our economic future as a country? Would it be something about electoral politics? What would you ask? And by the way, what's stopping you? Why not ask those questions of God? Now, I'm not here to suggest that God is going to audibly, vocally answer you, but why not turn toward God with the deepest questions of your heart? Whether those questions are macro in terms of the economy and politics and race relations and a pandemic, or whether they're very micro, questions about your own health, your own job, your own economic security, your own part in perhaps demonstrating for racial justice or engaging personally in the issue within your own local community. If you have questions that are really nagging at you, what's stopping you from bringing those in prayer right to the shepherd in chief? And then finally, how would you describe your own Christological views? Yeah, how would you describe those? Would you say you have a high Christology, a very high Christology, a somewhat high Christology, a very low Christology, maybe a somewhat low or moderate Christology? How would you describe, if somebody asked you, for you personally, who is Jesus in the grand scheme of the universe? Is Jesus God? Is Jesus just a guy? A famous guy, a smart guy, an influential guy, but just a guy? Or is Jesus something else, depending on where you are on that continuum we had on the screen a moment ago? And so, here we are. We have added one more of those super S words to our list. The list of S-word topics we've covered on these midweek videos for these many, many weeks. This saga all kind of began with silver linings, starting along about roughly St. Patrick's Day-ish, or within a week of that, mid-March. And here we are in mid-August, and we have reached the conclusion of our S-Word series. And that brings me to a bit of a news update as we get ready to wrap up today. This will be the final midweek video that I do, at least for a few weeks. There's still some unanswered questions about what is going to happen in terms of midweek Bible study at OCC. when we get into mid-September. But between now and then, I am going to take a few weeks actually, nearly 3, more than 2, not quite 3, whatever, weeks of some vacation time. I haven't used any vacation time yet in 2020. Digital ministry is quite a grind, at least for this relatively low-tech guy. So I'm feeling a bit of, you could call it burnout, or at least just a need to step back, step away, take a breath, recharge my batteries. And so for the next few weeks, at least, through Labor Day or another week even beyond that, there will not be any midweek videos, nor will there be any midweek Bible study yet. My guess is, don't hold me to this, folks, but my guess is that starting about the Wednesday after Labor Day week, so let's call it is that the second or the third Wednesday of September, my guess is starting right in there, we will probably have midweek Bible study resuming again, but my guess is at least initially it will be exclusively over Zoom. There's still, as you know, a mask mandate statewide for public indoor spaces. I know not everybody is comfortable for all sorts of reasons wearing a mask, and I'm mainly sympathetic to those who, in terms of being asthmatic or some other reason, they really do some struggle to breathe in a healthy way while wearing a mask. We would if we met in person, we would have to require masks. With everything factored into my thinking, I'm leaning right now to saying we'll have 2 or 3 sessions in September that will be entirely on Zoom on Wednesday mornings. But if you are a vehemently, stridently, decidedly anti-Zoom person, you don't want to install it on your computer, you don't want anything to do with it for any reason whatsoever, don't fret, don't despair, because my plan too would be to record the Zoom session. So on Wednesday mornings, we would have a Bible study session with however many of us wish to engage via Zoom. I would record the whole thing and then send that recording out with an email link probably later that same day, later that same Wednesday. So I'm guessing, again, don't hold me to it 100%. Things are fluid, as you know, with the virus. But I'm guessing the first several weeks of Bible study in the fall will be entirely via Zoom. Perhaps we will reach a point, maybe in October, who knows, when we'll be able to do some in-person Bible study as well. But that's kind of where I think things are probably headed. In the meantime, on Sundays at OCC, I think you're aware by now that we have kind of a normal pattern we've settled into from now through September 6th, which is the Sunday, one day before Labor Day. And it, of course, involves a link to a kids video that Amelia is doing each week. That'll be sent out as part of the electronic bulletin to the entire congregation through email Saturday evenings. Then one service in the sanctuary on Sunday at 9:30, in person and also live streamed on YouTube. There will be no singing out of concern for social distancing and the aerosolized spread of the virus in the sanctuary. So no singing, and masks are required if you're going to attend in person. Obviously, if you're at home watching on YouTube, you don't need to wear a mask. Coffee and conversation for those who attend in person will follow the service, and of course later each Sunday the service will be available as a recording. So if you sleep in or you have some other conflict that prevents you from seeing the service live in the moment at 9:30 on Sunday, you can always go back and catch up and watch the service after the fact. And as I think you know, we will not be having any children's or youth programming, Joyous Journey, MP3, nursery care, etc. We are going to consider all of those to be on summer hiatus, at least through Labor Day weekend. We are still making some decisions about exactly what our church life will look like come September 13th, the Sunday after Labor Day, and beyond. So stay tuned on all of that. Man, if you have been watching all along through all these midweek videos, I congratulate you because it has been quite a slog, hasn't it? We've covered a lot of territory. I have tried, even though I am very amateurish as a video creator, let alone a video, I guess you'd say, star or spokesperson or on-camera personality. I am very amateurish, inexperienced, unpolished, unskilled, whatever. But I have tried to make these videos engaging, thought-provoking, relevant to what's going on in our lives and in society, and hopefully spiritually reflective for you too. And maybe if you were at least slightly entertained along the way from time to time, consider that a bonus. So much the better. It's been quite a ride from mid-March through mid-August. I thank you for each and every moment that you have spent here engaging with these videos. I'm going to sign off for now and simply say stay tuned for more information about what midweek will look like, whether it be video, Zoom, or in person. What will midweek look like after Labor Day? Meanwhile, we'll hope to see you on Sunday, either in person in the sanctuary or via YouTube, live or after the fact. Folks, take care of yourselves, take care of your loved ones, take care of your neighbors, love your neighbors, as the biblical commandment so clearly states. And may God bless you along the way, and we'll see you soon. Take care.